tomb of Annas and his son-in-law Caiaphas. Yes, the high priest that was at the trial of Jesus.
Judas, one of the 12. That runs throughout the New Testament. Well, who put him in the 12? Jesus.
Akeldama, the ancient field of blood in Jerusalem, whispers tales from its dark past. This chilling site was purchased with the coins that sealed Jesus' fate, handed to Judas for his betrayal. Shadows linger over uncharted lands filled with open tombs and unseen hazards. As the twilight shrouds this mysterious ground, who knows what truths or horrors lie buried beneath? Join us. Will you brave the hidden depths of Akeldama, the secret tombs of high priests? This place is also situated on the tense border between East and West Jerusalem, making it even more crucial to be prepared before visiting. Despite years of research, studies, and excavations, this site remains largely unknown to most people. Historical documents dating back to the 3rd century identify this place as Akeldama, as recorded by historians like Eusebius. Interesting finds suggest that crusaders were active here in the 12th century, reportedly bringing 50 bodies a day to the site. In the 1990s, excavations uncovered a tomb believed to belong to Annas and his son-in-law Caiaphas, who was the high priest during Jesus' trial. Even more surprisingly, DNA from a hair sample found in one of the tombs revealed astonishing results. But here's where things get confusing. The Bible says that this cemetery was bought by high priests for burying foreigners and strangers, not the wealthy or elite. So why are there tombs of high priests here? There's a lot to unravel, so let's start from the beginning. As they approach what is believed to be Akeldama, also known as the Field of Blood, questions arise about whether this is truly the site of those historical events. Despite its importance, many locals don't even know it exists. It's located on the southern edge of Old Jerusalem, where two valleys meet, the Hinnom Valley and the Kidron Valley. These valleys have a dark history. For instance, the Kidron Valley, which Jesus crossed after being betrayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, is referred to by King David as the Valley of the Shadow of Death, a place that instills no fear in those with faith. Meanwhile, the Hinnom Valley, known as Gehenna in Hebrew, is synonymous with hell because of the terrible acts committed there, including child sacrifices to the god Moloch by the kings of Israel. As they observe the ancient trees in the area, they note that while the valley might not seem terrifying at first glance, its fertility is striking. If this is indeed Akeldama, the history of death and burial here could explain the fertile soil. And so, their exploration begins. The nearby Hinnom Valley marks the start of the path that leads to the tombs and Akeldama. The ancient steps they encounter add to the feeling that they are stepping back in time. In the Bible, in Acts chapter 1 verses 19 and 20, the Apostle Peter talks about Judas and Akeldama. He refers to a prophecy from the book of Psalms, mentioning how Judas's role as a disciple would be deserted and filled by someone else, leaving the place desolate in its former purpose. This place is believed to be where Judas Iscariot ended his life. The barren ground, silent and empty, seems to reflect the prophecy from the book of Psalms, which said that Judas's home would be deserted and empty of people. Despite the lively city around it, with the sacred mount visible and houses scattered on nearby hills, this specific area remains unchanged. It's a stark contrast to the rest of Jerusalem, where almost every piece of land is occupied or built upon. This large, empty plot stands out, with no homes, archaeological sites, or even the usual ticket booths you'd expect to see in such a historic city. Rhoda, a local, notes that land is incredibly valuable in Jerusalem, making empty spaces like this very rare. Yet here, we have a significant stretch of land that's just dusty and silent. Sergio, another observer, finds it strange to be in a place in Jerusalem that lacks any sign of human presence or historical markers. This unusual emptiness makes Akeldama a place of interest and discussion among scholars. The reason this land remains empty goes back to its dark history. Jesus had 12 disciples, and as his influence grew, the authorities wanted to capture him. Judas, one of the 12, betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, leading to Jesus' arrest and crucifixion. Overcome with guilt, Judas tried to return the silver, but the priests refused to take it back, calling it blood money. In despair, Judas ended his life. According to the book of Acts, his death was gruesome. His body fell and burst open on this very field, which he had unknowingly purchased with his betrayal. The priests used the rejected silver to buy a potter's field, meant to be a burial place for strangers and the poor. This field became known as Akeldama, or Field of Blood, a name that quickly spread throughout Jerusalem and added to the land's grim story. But this wasn't the worst part. Over the centuries, people have debated the different accounts of Judas's death. The Gospel of Matthew says Judas hanged himself, while the book of Acts describes a more violent death, where he fell and his body burst open. There are many theories, but one suggests that if Judas hanged himself, his body might have remained hanging through the Passover. Then, as it swelled in the heat, it eventually fell, leading to the gruesome scene described in Acts. This theory seems possible when you consider Akeldama's sloping landscape with its caves and rocks. It's easy to imagine how a fall could have been severe enough to cause such a terrible end. The debate continues, fueled by different historical and scriptural accounts that, while differing in detail, all point to the field's dark legacy. Evidence from scholars like Dr. Lean Rittmeyer supports the early identification of Akeldama, going back to the 3rd century. Historians like Eusebius and later Jerome and the pilgrim Antoninus confirmed the site's identity over the centuries, adding layers of historical evidence, even though there are occasional disputes over the exact location. What other chilling stories will we find in the ossuary next? The birth of the ossuary. In the 12th century, Jerusalem faced a serious problem. The city was overwhelmed by the number of sick and dying people, and something had to be done. To handle this, an unusual and grim structure became necessary: the ossuary. This building was where the dead were placed to decompose before their bones were stored. The regular burial sites simply couldn't keep up with the number of deaths, so this mass burial site was created. The need for such a place came from a crisis in Jerusalem's healthcare system. Historical records show that one of the city's hospitals was packed with patients, many of whom didn't survive. Sadly, up to 50 people died each day, but not much was written about how this was handled. It wasn't until a German traveler named Juan de Würzburg wrote about his visit that we learned more. In his travel notes, he mentioned that the hospital saw thousands of sick people, and every day, over 50 bodies were taken to the ossuary. Dealing with the dead in this way was a grim task. The ossuary was a sealed room with shafts on top, where bodies were dropped for decomposition. The process was unsettling. Workers would open the shaft and drop the corpses into the darkness below. As Rhoda and Sergio explored the site, they couldn't help but feel the eerie atmosphere of such a place, imagining the many bodies that once filled the space. The thought gave them chills, but this wasn't the worst part. As they continued their exploration, Rhoda and Sergio discovered that the area also contained over 80 burial caves, many of which dated back to the Second Temple period, around the time of Jesus. These caves weren't just simple holes in the ground. They were carefully carved, with steps leading down into decorated tombs. When they descended into one of these tombs, they found a chamber with funeral niches carved into the walls. It was clear that those who buried the dead had to crawl into these small spaces to lay the bodies to rest. The experience of exploring these caves was both fascinating and unsettling. Every corner of the caves revealed something new. Some had additional steps leading further down, while others opened into larger chambers. With each discovery, Rhoda and Sergio felt a mix of excitement and caution as they carefully navigated through the ancient, dimly lit spaces. What struck them most was the intricate design of the tombs. These were not just simple burial places. They were made with care and respect for the dead. This was a sharp contrast to the grim function of the ossuary above. The caves they explored were among the most elaborately decorated ancient tombs in Israel, showing how people of that time viewed death and burial with a deep sense of respect. As Rhoda and Sergio continued their exploration, they realized that the site's significance went beyond just its history. The combination of the ossuary's grim purpose and the beautiful tombs told a story of a society struggling with high mortality, but still trying to honor the dead. Dr. Gabriel Barkai, a respected archaeologist in Jerusalem, has spent much of his career uncovering fascinating pieces of history. Among his significant finds are a group of intricately decorated tombs, which he considers to be some of the finest examples of Jewish art from the Second Temple period. While exploring these tombs, something deeper within the site caught his attention. To investigate further, they set up a camera with a GoPro attached, allowing them to see live footage on a phone as they navigated the dark, cavernous spaces below. As they explored, Rhoda, one of the team members, was startled by the sight of funeral niches carved into the rock, complete with ancient inscriptions. This discovery led to a more detailed investigation by a team of archaeologists, including Dr. Shimon Gibson, who had already explored around 80 similar funeral caves. In one especially remarkable discovery, they found 20 ossuaries, stone boxes used to store human bones after the body had decomposed. These ossuaries, dating back to the time of Herod and Jesus, were not just remarkable for their age. They also had names like Maria and Shimon carved into them, offering a direct connection to people from the past. One ossuary was particularly special. It contained a shroud, a rare piece of fabric used to wrap a body, along with a lock of hair that was so well preserved that it could be analyzed for DNA. Finding organic material like this that could still be tested for DNA after 2,000 years was incredibly rare, especially in Jerusalem's humid climate, where such materials usually decay quickly. The DNA analysis of this sample yielded surprising results. It showed that the individual had tuberculosis and also traces of Mycobacterium leprae, the bacteria that causes leprosy. This was the first known archaeological case of leprosy from the 1st century, which ties intriguingly with biblical accounts of the disease. This find suggested that much more remains hidden within these ancient caves, waiting to be uncovered. The team was excited as they realized they were only beginning to explore what could be an incredibly important archaeological site. The decoration of these tombs also told a story about the people buried there. Such detailed and elaborate carvings were usually reserved for the wealthy or important figures in society, indicating that those entombed in these caves were far from ordinary. The craftsmanship was on par with what you might find in structures related to the Temple Mount, suggesting these individuals were of significant means or status. As the team continued their journey, they made their way to a cave tomb believed to belong to Annas, the high priest who played a role in the trial of Jesus. The historical and religious significance of this site was immense, further emphasized by an ancient olive tree nearby that seemed almost as old as the stories connected to it. As they navigated the area, the terrain became increasingly dangerous. Rhoda nearly fell into a large hole, narrowly avoiding a serious accident, thanks to her quick reflexes. This close call highlighted the physical dangers of exploring such ancient sites, adding another layer of intensity to their journey. What surprises will Sergio and Rhoda find in Annas' tomb in Silwan? Politics and archaeology intertwined. The neighborhood of Silwan, known for its complex political situation, is mostly Palestinian and has been the center of many disputes, especially concerning housing and archaeological digs. Sergio and Rhoda, finding themselves unexpectedly in this area on foot and alone, moved carefully, aware of the tension in the air. As they walked through the neighborhood, they came across something surprising: a burial chamber being used as a shelter for a sheep. It was an unusual and almost surreal sight, but it reminded them of the layers of history that exist in places like this. Their goal was to reach a specific site near the monastery of St. Onufrius, a monastery built over many such burial caves. One of these caves is known as the Refuge of the Apostles, and is believed to be where the apostles hid after Jesus was arrested. As they walked, they noticed a nearby quarry, which reminded them of Cana, but they joked about not coming back to Jerusalem just for this site. Their journey finally led them to their main destination, the tomb of Annas, the high priest. When they arrived, they found that the tomb had been repurposed as a stable for animals, its sacredness hidden beneath its current use. Despite the unpleasant smell and conditions, Sergio decided to enter, driven by curiosity about what might be inside, while Rhoda chose to stay outside, not wanting to deal with the unsavory environment. Inside the tomb, Sergio was amazed by the elaborate decorations and carvings, unlike anything they had seen in other burial caves or archaeological sites from this period. The level of detail and artistry within the tomb, as Dr. Barkai had pointed out, represents the height of Jewish art during the Second Temple period. The decorations inside the tomb were strikingly similar to the architectural features found beneath the Temple Mount, particularly a gate from Herod's time. But this wasn't the most astonishing part. The intricate art suggested that the person buried here was of high status or importance. This kind of decoration was typically reserved for monumental sites, so finding such designs in a tomb, especially one accessible in the politically charged area of the Temple Mount, was truly remarkable. The identity of the person buried in this tomb, believed to be Annas, the high priest mentioned in the New Testament, led to more questions. The Jewish historian Josephus, who lived in the 1st century, wrote about a tomb or monument built by the Romans near the city wall of Jerusalem, dedicated to Annas. Dr. Rittmeyer, an expert on the subject, believes that this cave matches Josephus's description perfectly. The tomb features a beautiful rosette on the ceiling and once had a triple-door entrance similar to the one at the Temple Mount. Though the original triple-door entrance is no longer visible, the traces that remain, along with the high level of decoration both inside and out, have convinced archaeologists that this is indeed the monument to Annas's tomb that Josephus described, the only one in the area decorated so richly. But this wasn't the end of their discoveries. As they learned more, they found out from Josephus that Annas had 5 sons, one of whom was his son-in-law, Caiaphas, who also played a significant role in Jesus' trial. In a nearby cave, archaeologists discovered another ossuary with the name Caiaphas inscribed on it, directly connecting the tomb to these historical figures from the New Testament. Rhoda and Sergio's exploration brings to light some surprising evidence that both Annas and Caiaphas, the high priests involved in the trial of Jesus, might have been buried in the same area. Sergio finds this particularly ironic. Annas, who refused to take the blood money from Judas, ends up being buried in a field bought with that same tainted money. Even more surprising is that his tomb is decorated as if he were royalty. This discovery leads them to question the historical records and the choices made by these priests. The scriptures say that the priests bought the field for burying foreigners and strangers. So why would high-ranking religious figures like Annas and Caiaphas be buried in such a place? Dr. Rittmeyer, a scholar they consulted, challenges the traditional idea that this site is Akeldama. He argues that a high priest would not want to be buried in a field bought with blood money, especially one meant for commoners. But his theory also opens up other possibilities. What if the real Akeldama is close by, just a few hundred meters away? The area is large, and the part where they found these richly decorated tombs might have been reserved for high priests and their families. Perhaps as burial spaces ran out, the priests bought the next available plot, possibly a potter's field, for burying foreigners and strangers. This could explain the stark difference between the elaborate tombs of the elite and the simpler graves of outsiders. But this wasn't the only twist in their journey. As they continue exploring Silwan, things take a tense turn. While they were filming, a local man, suspicious of their presence, confronts them aggressively. Rhoda, who speaks Arabic, tries to explain that they are just filming historical sites and that they are locals from Nazareth. However, the situation escalates when more young men join in, misunderstanding their intentions. This encounter highlights just how sensitive the area is, adding a dramatic moment to their journey. Although they chose not to film the confrontation out of respect and concern for safety, the intensity of the experience stays with them. It's a stark reminder of the political tensions that run deep in Silwan, where history and current events collide. Their adventure, while rich in historical discoveries, also becomes a personal reflection on the risks they took. The incident in Silwan serves as a warning about the dangers of exploring politically charged areas, especially without the right precautions. Rhoda and Sergio later talk about how things could have gone much worse and feel relieved and grateful that they made it out safely. This exploration not only brought them closer to the history of biblical figures, but also made them confront the very real dangers of modern-day Jerusalem. The contrast between the ancient past and the challenges of the present adds a deep layer to their journey, blending historical curiosity with today's realities. What if the real Akeldama is just nearby, hidden in plain sight? Share your thoughts, like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's mysteries.